Everybody, welcome. Good morning. It's Thursday, December 14th. Thursday, yes. It's the Dev Talk Show, and I'm Chris Gomez here with Rich Ross. How's it going, Rich? We've had a busy couple of days, or?
Yeah, it's like I never left here.
I suppose that is true. Last night
Yeah.
we were at Philly.net in person
Mm-hmm.
with Jeff Fritz, who many of our viewers, I think, would know. And he did this great, he's come in every year for the last few years and just done a recap, usually right after .NET Conf.
Right.
Yeah, that's been pretty typical. And
it was well attended. It was probably the most in-person attended session we've done, certainly within the last couple of years.
Yeah, it was great. Thanks to everybody who came out to that, because, we definitely are happy to see Philly.net growing again. And it's been an interesting road to get back to in-person, but nevertheless, I thought it was really good. And it was recorded, and it will show up online. So for folks who are looking for that sort of thing, let's just go right to the screen share and take a look at some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Let's see. I need to pick the correct screen, and then it automatically does that, and automatically does that, except for that's not so automatic. So there we are.
Cool. Nice.
So yeah, there we were, Philly.net. Let's build better with .NET 8. Oh, look, it's going to ask me to log in. I think I have that up here, though, don't I? Yeah, let's build better with .NET 8, C# 12, Blazor Unified, and Cloud Native. Our YouTube channel, the Philly.net YouTube channel, is at YouTube Philly.net, but you spell out the dot, D-O-T-N-E-T.
Yes. And that's consistent across all the properties. So we try, as funny as it sounds, that is our consistent way of doing it.
Yeah. Well, except for the meetup, which is Philly-net. So,
Oh, okay. Sorry.
That's all right. I mean, we try. Twitter's Philly, D-O-T-N-E-T. And so anyways, yeah, it's not up yet. This was actually my talk last month on Blazor United. Well, what it was really about, was about Blazor. So it's a little bit of a clickbaity title, because you can even see when the talk starts, it shows what I consider Steve Sanderson's kind of infamous video where he says, "Hey, everybody, I've got a prototype to show you." And the prototype he called Blazor United. But then I think, as we've heard on this show, I've made the case that the most important thing, I think, is understanding the render modes, and Blazor and interactive auto, which was maybe what you could call Blazor United, is just one of the render modes. But in any case, it's 2 hours there. We'll have his talk up as soon as we can get it. Also on Tuesday this week, the TechValley.net user group, which is in New York and organized by Chris Miller, also an MVP. It was great to meet him. I was introduced to him after someone who saw the Philly.net presentation said, "Hey, you ought to ask this guy to do this for TechValley.net user group." So I did. The user group currently meets online. They are working to move back towards a hybrid next year, is what he told me. And so this meeting was on Teams. There were about 50 folks there. And it also made its way to I didn't know much about this. If you're interested, this is the global .NET virtual user group. And I'm going to go ahead and put this link into our own chat here,
okay,
so that everyone can see it. So this is the global .NET virtual user group. And what was interesting about this is that he had the talk posted there too, which is something we could start doing at Philly.net. It's the kind of thing that I think I knew about, but I've never actually had as part of our routine.
Right.
So in any case,
so what's I'm sorry, I think I might have missed. What's the global group different?
Yeah, so the .NET Foundation I'm pretty sure it's the .NET Foundation,
Oh, okay.
hosts this group. And there is a submission form to say, hey, we've got a meetup
Mm-hmm.
and we would love for you to mention it,
Oh, nice.
to host it yourself. So could be really valuable if the Philly.net user group starts streaming again, right? Because this is definitely for folks to show up to things virtually.
That's cool. Okay.
So no, this was great. And thank you to the Tech Valley.net user group for having me on Tuesday. It was really, they're going to have a recording as well. And so, we'll get Jeff's recording up at the Philly.net site as soon as possible.
Yeah.
But, oh, whoops. I accidentally clicked over to I had the stream up on accident.
Okay.
On this own machine. And so I accidentally clicked over it, and then so somebody might have heard us laughing from a few minutes ago. So in any case, today we were going to talk about, let's bring over a security. Is that going to get me to it? Close enough. That wasn't a bad search result. So today we have been talking a lot about Blazor authentication and authorization. There is an authorization option in the templates, and when you choose it, you get a whole bunch of code thrown at you, and now it's yours. So congratulations. You have tons of components and pages and classes that you now own. And I've thought the first challenge for me was making sense of it all. Because there's a couple ways to approach it. You could simply take that structure and just start applying your own website design to it. Whether you're the front-end designer, programmer, who really understands that, or maybe someone else on your team, just go to work, start styling it and making it look like your own site. Or you can say, oh, I have different patterns I want to use. So I've got to start digging in and learning what goes on here. And so that's what we've been trying to do, using kind of our own site as a basis. So,
I mean, just curious, right? So when we went back and looked at that, and we did this a couple shows ago, I think, where new project said, hey, let's go do authentication. And it gave us a whole dozen more, Razor components inside of that folder there. I guess, is that, just kind of curious how you feel about it. Would you rather start with everything and cut out what you don't need, or have it more, have the project be the way it is and add the pieces you want on top of it? I'm just kind of curious if there's a preference for how you might think about doing this.
That's been a tough question that I've actually spent some time thinking about. And I think, as you know, since we had Jeff with us, we even chatted a little about this. Is I don't dislike the template because it kind of just gives you almost everything you might need.
Right.
And it's good sample code. It's actually not bad production code either, but you're going to have to go in and modify it.
Right.
I mean, that is a must. You have to go modify it, because by default it does a few things that you don't want to leave on your production code. But if this is really an interesting thing of, it would be nice to have a menu of options that you could say, hey, add this to the project, add this to the project.
Right.
Like maybe you start off by saying, I want I already have an authentication service, which could be you're hooking up to a Microsoft Entra directory, or you could have a different directory. And like you could have your own internal, maybe you want Windows domain to work. I don't know. it'd be nice if there was a menu that kind of said like, hey, I want to add this to the project, and then you did that.
Right.
And then I'm, because of the way I kind of think I want our system to run is, I want to add external authentication providers now, and then it adds that. Now I make that sound kind of easy, because then when you really think about how would an IDE or even a NuGet package add this in, there's modifications that have to be made to program CS, and there might even be little tweaks that have to be made to your page based on, okay, well, where's your menu, and what's going to point to login, and what's going to point to log out. And
right.
So you're never going to build something that just automatically, I don't think automatically just works. But maybe if you have if you have the right size piece and the right size documentation, which means not too much, then somebody could say, well, I installed this package, or I use the IDE to scaffold this thing, and now it's telling me, hey, you got to add these services to your program CS, and it looks like it's working. I don't know if that's ever going to be a replacement for digging in and learning ASP.NET Core Identity, which
I think if you're going to own the identity space in your application, then you've got to kind of dig in on some of that. I think I kind of think in a similar way, where it's more, if I'm just getting into this, give me all of the options and I'll pick, and so I can see, like you said, it's good sample code, and it's a good way to see how this is being thought of from the product team. And then, probably on my next project, I may not do that. I may go ahead and say, well, all right, I know the things I got to add in and the way I add them in, because they fit in with everything else I'm doing. So,
yeah, that's exactly it. Is I guess there's no escaping that you're going to have to own the identity space anyway, and authentication and authorization is so important.
Yeah,
that I don't think we can afford to kind of just say, well, I'll just have a package that makes it work. So what I'm going to do real quick is I just want to double check that if I'm going to go ahead and say, I'm going to start two projects. They're both going to be interactive auto.
Okay.
So that means I want -int auto, and I think I'm pretty good. Let's see. So if I say .NET new Blazor -int auto, I am not going to include the authentication. The default is none.
Okay.
Local DB is not going to get used this time. That's fine. I think it should be fine anyway. Default is false, but I do want the sample pages, which it looks like that's false. So I think this is good. So let's do that. So notice I'm using the .NET CLI. This would have been, if you've been watching some previous shows, you'll see that we've built these projects many times with the file new project, and all these options are here. It's just you just have to go look up the switches. And then I'm going to make a second project where we include, I'm just going to call it include, and in this one we include the identity stuff. So it's the same exact file new project, except I want
-AU,
and it looks
individual,
like individual. Right? Okay, so now that we've done that, we have two projects. And let's open them up. I suppose I could use Visual Studio Code, but it might be a little easier since we just want to take a quick peek. It might be easier to just get these both opened, and then we'll try and deal with switching back and forth. So what have we got? These are all, of course, opening on the other screen. So here is the include project, and let me bring over the none project. And the main thing I think I wanted to point out, which I think you already know, Rich, is because I chose interactive auto, I get the two projects. This is server-side code, and this is client-side code. Program CS is here. And Program CS is very nice and readable in the project. I mean, we can fit it all on one screen. And it's easy to walk through. And basically, we're saying, okay, we're adding Razor components, which every Blazor app has to have because register service is required for server-side rendering of Razor components. Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
And then, oh, well, now I need to add Blazor server and Blazor WebAssembly. So we're used to seeing that, right?
Yep, definitely.
Then we're used to seeing this, where it's essentially the same, except that what this code is doing is this is basically mapping the endpoints that have the page attribute, and also saying, hey, we allow these render modes. And then there's one other thing that it does here, which might be mysterious to people, where it's also saying, let's make sure that we map any endpoints that are sitting in the client assembly. And so the way that they do this, which is kind of sneaky, is they say, well, we know that there's a counter component that's in the client assembly, so let's go find that, and then we'll map that assembly, because they can't use the other trick that's used in these projects, which is to say type of program,
right?
Because that would map the client project, since that's the one we're sitting in.
Makes sense.
They use that, they use that trick over here in components routes, where they say, let's map all the routes from the assembly that containing the program class, the class we're in, that's the server one. But oh wait, let's add another assembly, and let's add the one that has, this client imports namespace. So what that basically means is that if you use this template and you get rid of the counter component, you have to pick another component so that you can make, otherwise this isn't going to work the way you wanted to anymore.
Okay.
The main reason why I'm showing this is because I want to just quickly open up all these folders and say, when you do this looks very manageable. I've opened everything up. I didn't open up www root.
Yeah.
Not a whole lot of components, not a whole lot of pages. You can see the counter component is implemented as a client component because it does have interactivity. And because it has interactivity and we want it to be interactive auto, it's got to be in the client side, so that it's weird, but that's what you have to. So now it works on both sides, right?
Okay.
So then we switch over to, this is the template where we said the only difference was give us authentication.
Okay.
And now I start opening up Program CS, and it's got a lot more stuff going on. This is where I think it gets interesting. We expected to see this, right? The add services to the container.
Yep.
But then here comes all these other services, cascading authentication state, which is great because this allows your components to retrieve information about the authenticated user, especially important on the client components. But then we add these other services. And the thing about it is these services, so cascading authentication state adds a component that's part of ASP.NET. But these services that we get in add scoped, when I zoom in on them, this class is ours. This isn't from ASP.NET. This was included in the template.
Okay.
The identity user accessor, the identity redirect manager. The authentication state provider is a core component, but this look at this one, persisting revalidating authentication state provider. This is important for client implementation. That's ours. We now own this.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So when I start to open this up, where are they? Here they are. There's a few more too that we haven't found yet. But this is now my code,
Yeah. So it's not like we brought a NuGet package in. We actually had file or class files dropped into our project.
Right. Exactly. And then authentication was added, which is, if you were to do this by hand, you would have an add authentication. And you could fill this out with many options, which I'm still learning a lot about. But what's important is this is basically setting up for the way they're going to store a cookie in the browser when somebody signed in. That's what this is doing. Is it saying, okay, I'm just going to use defaults. And by the way, this extension method goes out and it goes out and does more, like, which is really great. I can hit F12 and here I am in the ASP.NET source code.
Yep.
And I could really start to poke around and say, what is it actually doing? This could be very useful when you decide, if you make a decision that I want to take ownership of this. And so I don't want the add identity cookies because maybe I don't want the two-factor stuff. Maybe you do. Maybe you have no need for the external logins. So you might say, I'm going to implement my own extension method and I pull out the things that I don't care about.
Okay.
So we're not doing that right now. But when I go further down, here's some more stuff. This is building up the connection string for where the identity database is going to live. We're going to use SQLite. We're going to have an exception filter for the database developer exceptions because I think, as you've seen, Entity Framework can come in and intercept those when you're in developer environment and say, like, well, hey, you didn't do a migration, and it even will provide you a button to be like, do you want me to do it?
Right.
Which is kind of neat.
Yeah.
And then we've got even more. Add identity core, add entity framework stores, add the sign-in manager, add the default token providers. So it very quickly can seem overwhelming. We've got a singleton for an email sender, and this no-op email sender is a component. It's a class that we've been handed that doesn't actually send an email, but it's a default implementation for the iEmail sender interface. Now, that is an ASP.NET Core interface.
Right.
And if you want emails sent so that when somebody registers, they confirm with an email, you have to now go implement the interface and provide your own implementation. You're not going to use the identity no-op email sender because that doesn't do anything. It lets you try this stuff out without actually implementing everything.
Right. So you can get up and get to F5 very quickly.
Yes.
But there's a lot of work still left to do.
Yes.
And I think we don't have to talk about it now, but I think at some point in the future episode, maybe, to come back and talk about, yes, I get it. Bare bones, let's get you up and running. We're going to give you a database for storing your usernames and passwords in. Not the best idea, right? I get it. We need to get things running, but it shouldn't be, it shouldn't be where you think about going for your production app.
Yeah. I mean, the ASP.NET Identity built-in database stuff, it works, but it may not be ready for like an enterprise scale if you want to own user accounts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The last one that I want to point out is map additional identity endpoints. That one, I don't know if we'll see it today, but we might come back and see this one. Add additional endpoints required by the identity account Razor components, which is like what it's really doing is it's coming in and saying, okay, all those account endpoints, I'm going to map things up for you so that they work. And it turns out that this is actually a fair amount of code in here for that particular method. And, it all gets wrapped into one line of code. It took me a little bit of time recently to say, I got to go find out what this thing is doing, because there were some places where I scratched my head.
Okay.
So now the question is this, and to kind of set the stage is, I think there's no way in 45 minutes that we could truly say, let's go take the other project and add this stuff back in.
Right. Right.
But I wanted to try out, what if I simulated doing that? What if I and that might sound kind of funny, but what if I kept this stuff in place so that I have a foundation? I'm not running around saying like, oh gosh, I need that class, or I need that project, or I need that using, especially because we only meet for an hour in the mornings.
Right.
What if instead I said, okay, I'm going to sort of hand wavy pretend that I don't have this, or at least figure out later what I can comment out, what can I remove. We haven't even looked yet at what happens in your project. So previously there was pages and layout, and this isn't too overwhelming. And here's
Seems reasonable.
pages. It's not too overwhelming. The auth page, there's a second page for auth. And then again, like we talked about, there's a few other classes here that are new code. But we haven't opened this one yet. And when you open account and you open pages,
Where did they all come from?
Yeah, this is all my code now. A page to log in, a page to show when someone's locked out, a page to show when the user's invalid, a page to show when they want to reset their password, a page to show when they register, a page to show if they're doing an external login, meaning like a Microsoft account or something. And I'm not done, because now that I'm a user in the system and I want to manage my own account, boom.
Oh, wow.
Just a lot.
Okay.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
And the reason I keep using this term is we own this code now. This isn't a NuGet package that I would just go like, oh, there's an update to the NuGet package. Let's go get that update. Not that you don't own code that comes in through NuGet either, believe it or not, but this is truly in my project, and it's up to me to decide what to do with it.
Right.
So I think what we'll do, I hope this is a good introduction. Tell me what you think is, well, let's run it first of all.
Okay.
Because this will help us get through the bare bones setup. People may have seen this before if they've seen the show, but when you run this project for the first time, it's not that things don't work. It's that for one thing, we don't have that database. That database doesn't exist, but ND Framework will create it for us with migrations. So the sample app has a counter page. This is using interactive auto. It's got a weather page. It's got an auth required page. So this page has an authorized attribute on it. And when you click it, automatically ASP.NET Core Identity shifts you over to the login page.
Right.
But I don't have a login account, so I can't use it. So let me register as a new user. And this is where things should go horribly wrong in terms of the fact that I just don't have the database set up. Click register. Oh, you know what? I wonder if it just did it, because I've never tried the SQLite stuff before.
Yeah, if it's SQLite's just a file on your system, I believe. So it's just going to instantiate that for you.
That would be really cool. So we didn't get the stuff that we saw in the SQL Server version where it's like, oh my gosh, you got to do a migration.
Yeah.
Let's see. If it logs in, I'm going to be super thrilled. Yeah, I think that's great. Now this auth required page, I think, is open to us. And sure enough, it knows who we are. So that's cool. Okay. Bare bones is done. So if we go take a quick look, the auth page, this is the page that required you to be authorized. It has an authorized attribute. And the only thing it's doing is just saying like, well, yep, you're authenticated. And oh, when you're authorized and you use the authorized view component, there is a cascading parameter that you get called authentication state. And it's already named for you context. And you can start looking through it to see, well, who's the user? What is their claims principal identity? What's their identity interface? And then we can go pluck out their name.
Nice.
So this is how in Blazor we bring down the information on who's been authorized, because we don't necessarily have access to HTTP context. That if you're coming from MVC or Razor pages, you might be saying like, why are you going through all this? Like, just use HTTP context. But we don't have access to that in Blazor WebAssembly.
Okay.
And we don't even really have access to it in Blazor Server. Because remember, these are components, not pages with a full context around them. And so they're components that are being picked out by Blazor in a page to be like, oh, hold on, they want this counter component. Well, the counter component, it's just this little thing. So although in this case, it happens to be a page-based component, but I'm Blazor WebAssembly. I don't have any access to HTTP context. So the cascading parameter that comes down, and that's a concept in Blazor where you basically say, I need to retrieve a parameter from a parent component. Well, that parameter is context. So
Gotcha.
that's how this works. But I don't think it demonstrates the whole thing. So what I want to do is, I don't know if people are watching at home are asking this question, so I'm going to ask it for you. Is so far all you're showing me is how to deal with an authenticated user in a page that requires them to be logged in.
Okay, that's fair.
This authorized attribute isn't asking for a whole lot. It's not asking for you to be any specific user with specific claims, specific roles, specific policy. It doesn't care. It's just like, are you authenticated at all?
Right. Do I know who you are? Yeah.
And I'm trying to use those terms correctly, because to say that I'm authorized to view this page, well, I mean, it's technically true, but really what we're saying is anybody who is authenticated is authorized to use this page.
Yeah.
Because there is, we very often, unfortunately, these two words start with the same 4 letters.
Right.
So it is very easy for all of us to say, like, hey, let's get our auth working. But there's 2 components to auth. It's authentication, knowing who you are, and then the details about you that will help me determine whether you are authorized for a resource.
Yeah. And you might see those abbreviated. I don't know, when we talk about them, sometimes we talk about them as Auth N for authenticated and Auth Z for authorized.
Oh, you know what? To be fair, I've even made the mistake of saying Auth N or Auth Z, thinking both. But you're right. I have to do a better job of authentication as authentication, authorization as authorization.
Yeah.
So here's the home page. I'm not going to put an authorized attribute here, but I want to show different things whether or not you are authenticated.
Okay.
So, I mean, the question might be, can you do that? And well, the answer is yes. You don't need an authorized attribute, but I will take on the authorized view component that we just saw. And oh, I love how tiny the IntelliSense was there. I think what I forgot to do, I might have forgotten to switch out of 4K, which sometimes can make our output a little blurry. So I apologize if that's the case. I think it's interesting I think it's actually interesting what Copilot brought up here, because I actually think I'm really close to kind of saying this is pretty much what I was going to do.
Okay.
So I'm going to take it, and then we'll modify it. I'm going to hit Control K and hold down Control and hit D so that it fixes up the code there. You see how authorized was a little off?
Yeah.
In many of our file formats in Visual Studio, you can do Control K D. That's called a chord in Visual Studio. When I hit Control K, in the lower right-hand corner, I don't even think I can zoom in it because I'm still holding on to the Control K, the control. It says Control K was pressed, waiting for second key of chord. Maybe I can zoom in. Yeah. Control K was pressed, waiting for second key of chord. So the second key is Control D, and that is it's supposed to format code. So let's say I mess this up. Let's see how good it does here if I move indentation around. Control K D. All right, cool.
Snaps it right back. That's awesome.
You can do that in Visual Studio Code. There's a format document.
Yeah, it's not the same chord pattern.
I want to say it's Control Shift
Control
F
Shift
F.
F. Yeah.
And it's different on a Mac. It's like Command Shift F. You could define it to whatever you want.
You can.
Not that you can't do that here either, but that's called a chord in Visual Studio. There are other chords as well, but that's one that I have memorized is Control K C to comment a line, and Control K U to uncomment a line. Those are probably the 3 chords I have memorized.
And with any 3 chords, you can play an awesome song. So there's that.
Oh, is that? Yeah, that's right. Huh? That's the old. There's a great YouTube video that makes that. I'm just double checking here. I have my stream. I accidentally brought StreamYard down. We did get a good morning from Chops to you. Thank you for joining us.
Morning, Chops.
Okay, so this was pretty good. This was pretty close to what I wanted, because what I definitely wanted is I wanted to see it. Let's see, what is it complaining about? I think I'm okay. I wanted this to build. Let's see if it builds. Yep. I wanted it to go ahead and tell us who is authenticated. I don't really care what it says after that. And then if you're not logged in, well, let's have you log in. Now, this actually isn't correct. To log in, you would not go here. You would go to account, login. That's the default location that identity has, that this identity process has. They've already routed this, and I could log in. So let's run it real quick. And we'll make some more changes. But what I'm hoping for is, welcome to your new app. Looks like you're not logged in. Cool. So even though I use the authorized view component, that's a Blazor component, and then I configured it with an authorized and a not authorized section, it's smart enough to say like, well, you don't have an attribute here that says authorized for the whole page. So I'm going to let you in, and then I'm going to show you different sections based on whether you're authorized for this or not. And in our case, because we didn't have an authorized attribute, everyone is implicitly authorized as long as they're logged in. So we're currently not authorized. I'm going to click log in. We came over here. That's great. I'll use the same email. That's cool. I'll put in a password. I'll click log in. And now I'm seeing the other part of the Razor syntax, the other part of that Razor component where it says, I will identify you. And here's a link out to some random, it's not random, out to a place in Learn. In fact, it's telling us all about securing an app. So that's cool.
So that's just the control that gets included when we do the checkbox individual for authorization.
You know, I'm not even sure necessarily if you would need that checkbox. I think, although you're right, the checkbox gets it for you. I think the important part is that you have one of the packages that starts Microsoft.ASP.NET Core Identity. Because we are using Entity Framework Core, this brought in the identity stores. And eventually, I think this is going to bring us all the way down to what I was looking for, Microsoft Extensions Identity Core.
Okay.
I believe that we could have filed new project, left all this stuff out. I think we could have taken Identity Core, brought this here, and we'd have had the same effect. Yeah.
Okay.
But you've got to do a ton of configuration, though. Like all that stuff in Program CS, we wouldn't have ready. And I certainly want to get better at that. But I figured for the 30 minutes we have left, we'll go ahead and take some inspiration from the template for now.
But
if you watch our show, go ahead.
I guess the cool thing is that's a pretty cool control to have at your fingertips, right? Because I can say, on my page, conditionally show whether somebody's authenticated or not this content.
Right. And that leads me to what I was kind of hoping to do. I mean, we're not going to get it completely finished because of time. But I don't know why. Do you want to go downstairs? What's going on? Yeah, my dog is giving me a hard time. I'll open the door and then we'll see. Watch. He'll be back up here in a second. He might have thought he heard something, and then he's a dog. So if he thought he heard something outside, he has to go see.
Yep.
What is it? So, but then if I leave that door closed, he'll start banging on it.
Right.
Can't win. So there are many websites out there where I actually don't mind this approach, where you come to the site, you're not authenticated, and there might be an icon or or something up here that says login, and you'll click, and right in place there will be a component that pops up to let me log in. And then after I log in, it just everything just works. And from then on, instead of saying login, it says like, hello, Chris, or something like that.
Right.
The experience that we got in the box is still page-based. This is still a page. And the auth, the login page is still a page. Like if I go over to it, I got to go to account, go to pages, go to login.razor. This is still a page, and all of the login stuff is here. And I started wondering, well, what does it take for me to componentize login?
Right.
So we're going to do that.
Okay. Yeah, because when you get navigated away, you away from the context of what you were doing on that page that probably set you down the path that you want to go log in.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, the current implementation does when it routes you over to the login page, it includes a return URL. At least I'm pretty sure it does. I actually think we can go look at that because this is login.razor. And let's see, login.razor has some code called login user that now is taking what you input for email, password, and whether or not you want to be have a permanent cookie, a semi-permanent cookie, and see this return URL, redirect to return URL.
Nice.
So if you successfully logged in, they redirect you. And if you were on the home page and you said log in, it'll send you back there. If you go to that auth required, it'll send you back there. Where does return URL come from? Oh, supply parameter from query. So what we're saying here is that when somebody calls account login, there's going to be a return URL. If there is a return URL in the query string, we'll honor that.
Right.
And so it's like, well, what does that look like? Well, maybe we'll take that quick aside. Not logged in. I go to the auth required page, which is /auth.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened is we were redirected to the login page. And we were redirected to the login page. But return URL is saying when you're done, go back to /auth.
Cool.
So that's how that works. But now, I don't know if that was mysterious to you. Who put in the return URL? Like, how did that happen? Well, here's how it happened.
Okay.
We have app.razor. If you watched this before, you know about app.razor. What I love about how app.razor looks now is it looks just like a web page with a couple components. One of them is the routing component. The other one is a component that allows you to now start modifying things in the head section, like you could modify the page title, stuff like that. But if I go to the routes.razor, no, I'm sorry, that's not what I really wanted. I want to go to navmenu.razor because all of our pages rely on a main layout, and our main layout has a sidebar with a nav menu. That's what that purple menu is on the left. For our own site, you saw how I kind of pulled that aside and made it a top menu. The nav menu, when you're new to Blazor and you're adding pages, this is where you do it. And then what you'll do is you'll modify all the CSS and everything to make it look how you really want. When we go down to auth required, check this out. If you are authorized, let's see, where is it? Here we go. We say, well, actually, no, this is for current URL. What do I want? I want login, not authorized, account login. Well, okay, I think I got this backwards. Once you're logged in, they start showing you a log out feature, which they don't show you when you're logged in. So they're using the same trick. They're saying when you're authorized, show a logout link. When you aren't authorized, show register and login. But when you aren't authorized, let's go ahead and get the current URL. Like, well, where did they get that? So this was some interesting code to discover how to do this. If you can get the current URL by calling the navigation manager to base relative path and saying navigation manager URI. And now you're in a position, you want to pay attention to the on location changed event. And now you're in position to change that in case the location changes. And now you know what the current URI for your web page is. So I answered the question for log out. I could have been wrong, and I think maybe I needed to come down here and find it. Where return URL gets, it says supply parameter from query. So the login page is, you know what it might be? It might be that the ASP.NET Identity stuff is doing it for login.
Okay.
That'll be interesting to look up. Yeah. When I was looking through this last night, it was the log out thing that really got me interested, because I was sitting here going, how does it know where to return to? Like, how did it know? And I found that. But I got on a little bit of an aside there. That's not what we were trying to do. What we want to do is create a brand new component. And so the convention that the team is that I'm seeing, the team, when I say the team, I mean people like Dan Roth, I mean people like Steve Sanderson, I think it's McKinnon Buck, I think is his name. He's shown up. I've seen him a lot on the ASP.NET community stand-up lately. He's I don't know how long I've recognized him being on these shows, but he's been awesome. He's been doing a lot of great presentations. I've seen them following this pattern of saying, okay, if you're a page component, you go here, but if you're not, you just live in the root. So let's add a Razor component. Yeah,
I guess then you're accessible to anything.
Well, I don't know if that's it so much as because they do kind of say that if your components want to be categorized, like if that makes sense, then create new folders.
Okay.
I'm not actually sure that any of that is necessary because I think we could do this as an experiment. I think if I pulled all those pages out, it's the page attribute that makes you a page.
Oh yeah. I didn't want to say that being in the folder, but from an organization perspective, right? I could have components sitting at the root because I can kind of place them anywhere. Not that they have to be there.
Yeah.
But so you to avoid could tidy up and put them in a folder.
Right, I could. So to avoid confusion, I'm just going to call this my own login, so that we don't have login here and login there. But it's my own login is the component, and then I have no idea what my dog is all up about.
He's very excited about identity.
Yeah, I suppose. But since this is my own login, here's what we're going to do. We're going to, and we're going to drop in some code here, so hopefully not too confusing. We're going to use Blazor's edit form. Now, we have shown on this show that you can use the standard HTML form element.
Yep.
And you can submit and you can do a lot of cool things.
They did it on the logout. It was wrapped in a form tag.
Right. But I thought what we haven't done a whole lot of is use the built-in edit form, which this ends up rendering out to an HTML form. You have a little bit more power. There's a built-in validation, which I'm not using, but they are using in the template. And that validation can be tied to the data model of your of the data model for the form. And then you can use data annotations to say things like, oh, this is a password. And so it's like, oh, it's a password. Well, what are your password rules? And then it'll enforce the password rules. It's pretty cool. I'm not doing any of that. This is a pretty simple one that's basically saying we are filling out a model that is a member of this class called model. That's not declared yet.
Okay.
When we submit, we're going to call a method called submit right here in this component. And then your edit form needs a form name. I'm not taking advantage of it, but it needs one.
Okay.
So we need some code now. First of all, we're going to need that model that I've been bragging about. So I'm going to call that model credential, and I do not have to include it in this component, but I'm going to. I could go put this out and then include it with a using. It could be a wonderfully separated concern in a data model section, but to keep it all together, I'm declaring it right there.
Okay.
It doesn't even have to be a class. I could have made that a record, and maybe that would be something I should have done, but I didn't. So now that I've declared that that class, I'm going to create an instance of it and note that I'm calling it model. So now things map up. What we're basically saying here is when somebody fills out this input text, bind the value into email or bind it into password. And then since the credential could theoretically be null, we have to make it nullable. And that's pretty much it. That gets that going.
Okay.
We have not said what to do when we submit yet. So when we submit, I'm going to create a new method here. This ended up being an async method. It did not start life as an async method. I actually don't need this, but we might take advantage of it. Okay. This is total fluff piece of code. Model equals model. But what submit is going to do is it's going to say, Well, let's have the sign-in manager try to sign someone in using a password. We'll pass in the email. We'll pass in the password. The third parameter is whether or not to make the cookie persistent. Instead of implementing a checkbox, which I could do, I'm just going to say false. Let's just not do it. And I'm not going to lock the person out if they fail over and over and over. Because we're testing. That's why.
Yeah.
If this succeeds, we will use the redirect manager to redirect to the homepage. I'm not being fancy and saying, oh, let's redirect back to where it came from. Nope, just redirect to the homepage. If this does not succeed, let's put up in an error message that the error, that it didn't work. But I don't have an error message. I don't have an error message data member yet, so let's add that. This credential might be able to be private too. Maybe if we have some extra time, we'll try that out. So even though I said that I now have a data member called error message, I don't have anywhere to display it. So there that is.
Nice.
This is a pretty crude, component, but that's okay.
We're getting the point across.
Right. Now, it's still complaining. It's saying, well, the sign-in manager doesn't exist. Okay, well, let's just ask the refactorings. You're using ASP.NET Core Identity, right? Yep, I am. And once I do that, that lights up the sign-in manager.
Now it's happy.
Yeah. Here's the interesting thing. The redirect manager it's also saying, well, wait a second. Well, of course, it's funny because that didn't go away. I think that's...
Is that awaitable?
It is awaitable. That's not what it's complaining about. I think we're okay. I know that sounds weird, but I think sometimes in Razor pages, they don't get reevaluated the same way source code does. Oh, no. I know what the problem is. So we've included identity, which means that, yes, the sign-in manager now lights up. But the problem is it's like, hold on a second. You can't use sign-in manager as a class. You can't use it like this.
Oh, okay.
We have to inject the sign-in manager that came with identity. That's what's going on. And so when I inject a real sign-in manager that uses application user, which again, it doesn't know about quite yet, I called it sign-in manager. Maybe to avoid confusion, we could say sign-in MGR. That's now the name of that. And then we go change this here and it should be fine.
Nice.
Okay. Now, application user, where did that come from? Well, let's right click on it and let refactoring help us and say, oh, you need to include data. Well, includes the name of our application.
Yeah.
But in the data section, we have an application user. So you can optionally implement a class based on identity user, and you can add more parameters to the default. Maybe you want, like, I think the default stuff in here is like the name. What if you want a phone number? What if you want the department they're in? I don't know.
Yeah.
You can create a user class, and then Entity Framework will pick this up. And when it creates the database, it'll create more columns for those particular things.
Okay.
So now that we've included that, I know this seems a little weird, include, but that's because I called the project include. So the question now is, where's the redirect manager coming from? Because it's still not happy about it. So let's see if it'll help me. No, it's not helping me. I think it's because I wanted to say, I think it's because the redirect manager is something that lives in here.
Okay.
But you know what? I'm going to try, because it is still, oh, no, it's not. I'm sorry. It doesn't live there. Let me find it for you. Here we go. The identity redirect manager.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So unlike sign-in manager, which comes with ASP.NET, the identity redirect manager was plopped into our application, and now we own it. This thing knows how to, well, we can look through. This thing basically knows how to use the navigation manager to send you somewhere else after login. That's essentially what it's for. So,
okay.
We get a lot of code handed to us, right? I need to inject that as well. and it's called the redirect manager. They used a capital, but then the problem is like, I don't know about that identity redirect manager. So, you need to include the component's account namespace because that's where it lives.
Right. Okay.
So, quite a bit went on to make this light up. But it's not going to work yet. And the reason why it's not going to work is because what I've done, which is different from how login works in Blazor identity by default, I've now made this a component. So someone has to host this component.
Sure.
Right? So let's go back to the home page. And let's say, look like you're not logged in. We don't need this. And let's just now, all we really have to do is just say my own login, which that's taking that. And because, it's even going to, I love how it's suggesting this. This isn't a component that has content or parameters. That's all I need. It's self-closing.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Okay.
So, let's see. What am I pretty confident about most of this? I think so. Or we're going to find out.
Yeah.
Okay. Edit form requires either a model parameter or an edit context parameter. So, it blew up
trying to model, didn't we?
I thought I did, but let's go back and take a look. Oh, I actually know what it is. So that's good. That's good. So here's what happened. We have declared a model.
Right.
And the problem is, though, is if this code runs, just knowing your C#, what's the value of model right now?
Model.
No, if I say
right now it's null.
It's null. That's the problem.
Okay.
So the edit form went to bind the model, and it was like, dude, the model's null. So there's a couple ways to deal with this. One, you've
already said it's nullable as a value, as a property.
I did.
Okay.
So what we're going to do is we're going to override onInitialized, which is the method that runs when a component is ready to start.
Yep.
So what I could do, I could say model equals new credential. I could do that.
Okay.
And that'll work, at least in terms of getting through that login page. I'm going to go ahead. There's a bug here, but I'm going to go ahead and leave it.
All right.
I'm going to go ahead and leave it because I'm actually not 100% sure how it'll respond. So this is kind of cool, though. We're not authorized. We're not authenticated, which means we're going into the not authorized part of that authorized view component.
Right.
And here's a login form. So it's pretty
Very cool.
And let's try logging in. I'm going to click submit, and boom, it blew up. And it blew up because we got to a line of code saying, wait a second, the username is null, the model's null. What are you doing? Why is it null? And so your question might be like, what do you mean it's null? I thought you initialized it.
But then what are you doing at line 31?
Well, line 31 was really something I did when I was working on this. I threw this in so that I'd have a quick place to just examine the model.
Okay.
Otherwise, it doesn't do anything else. So let's run this again with breakpoints. Somebody might already know if you're watching live, or if you're watching live, or maybe you're watching in the future, you might be like, come on, I know what this is. So the component initializes, and it's setting model to a new credential. So I'm going to hit F10, and it's now, this is not null anymore. This is now a credential that just happens to have a null email and password, but that's okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to hit F5. I'm going to put in these credentials. I don't know if you have it yet, Rich. If you don't, or maybe you're just letting the suspense move along.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. It doesn't matter. This happened to me. I had to figure this out. So I click submit. When I click submit,
it's
right
back
now, the model is null again. The component is running onInitialized.
Okay.
So
this takes me back to the web form is page not null.
Yeah. So I mean, it's basically getting into model and saying, yeah, look, I created a new model, but email and password are null. I'm not defending against that.
Yeah.
There's no defense here for email and password being null anywhere. And besides, the defense doesn't really matter. Like, I don't want the component to blow that away.
Right.
So we're going to use, there's many ways to do this. I could just write like, if model is not null, then create a new credential. But I am going to use some fancy C#. I'm actually not 100% sure when this came into the language, but this is like the null assignment operator or something. We should probably look up what it's actually called. I don't know if you use this operator a whole lot. It's okay if you don't. The null coalescing operator. Okay. Yeah. The null coalescing operator. I think, no, actually, no, that's not it. It's dash equals. It's dash equals. So well, anyways, here's what it does is it says it checks to see if the parameter on the left side is null. And if it isn't, then it doesn't do what's on the right side. If it is null, then it says, oh, well, then I'll do what's on the right side and create a new one. And oh, that's more fancy syntax too. That's a target typed new expression, I think is what it's called, where you don't say new credential. You just say, hey, you can infer what I'm trying to new up, right?
Yeah.
So that's like, that's fancy.
That is fancy.
At least I'm pretty sure I've
done this right. And that's kind of recent too, right?
I think, yeah, it's fairly recent. So as long as I've now caught everything, we'll run this again, and this should do what I want. I'll be a little embarrassed if it doesn't. But oh, no, there is one more thing.
It's going to break, you're saying.
It is going to break. That's right. So, I forgot one other piece. Let's forget this. Let's do model. I got to set it back so that we see it right. Model equals new. And look, I can even use the target type new expression there. So let's not make that change yet.
Okay.
Let's not make that change yet. So here's what I forgot. The first thing that I forgot is when we ran this and we came back in, model was still null. Sure. So that means I was kind of half lying to you. I forgot that if I want to be able to fill out this model it's instance member from the form, our render mode is server side right now.
Okay.
Right? I don't have so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say supply parameter from form. This is a new attribute. There's supply parameter from form and supply parameter from query string. These are new because in previous Blazor, everything was interactively rendered. Everything. You were either Blazor server or you were Blazor WebAssembly, and that was how it worked. Right. But this particular form is being rendered statically first.
Okay.
So, right, yeah. So now when I run it, still not going to work, but it's going to be closer to what I expected. The model will now get filled from the form on submission, where previously it didn't. And actually, when you go rewind this video, you're going to see like, oh gosh, he was kind of hand waving there. Still blows up, but that's because I didn't put a breakpoint in for us to watch this. So let's get the breakpoints back in. It is still going to blow up because it is still going to be null, but the reason is going to be because on initialize is going to blow away what's in the model. Brand new run. I do expect it to be a new model. That doesn't surprise me. None of that surprises me. But when I submit, here's what surprises me. On initialize is running again. The model has what I want.
Right.
Before my answers are in there.
Yeah.
But it didn't hold. I was hoping that would hold. But they're about to get blown away. So oops, model is now email and password are null again.
Yeah.
Because we were indiscriminate and on initialized. So that was where I jumped ahead. I got to the second part first. That was where this comes in.
Now that makes sense why we need to do that.
Yeah. So I'm glad that I backed up there, because people might watch this and say, like, I don't understand. You just threw this in and it all started working. And it's like, well, because I should have done this first. And then we would have seen that we were blowing away the model. So now we're saying, don't blow it away if it exists. And then we can come through. And after all that, which so much time on this show, like we get to the very end and it's like finally the payoff. So I'm hoping that this is it. Here we go. We are logged in, and we're now showing the content that lives in the authorized side, right?
Yep.
That's what we wanted. The logout thing lights up. So because of everything I showed earlier, logout lights up because over in the nav menu, they're doing the same thing. I click logout and boom. I mean, it's instant.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So I feel like we could build the appropriate CSS and everything to move this to the upper right, and could even include it on every page if we wanted to.
I think it seems reasonable.
That's where I'd like to go.
Okay.
I mean, we're not going to do it. It's almost time for stand up, but
right. But foreshadowing, or
yeah,
for what we want to work on next show,
right.
And this is one of those things that I think over the next however many shows it's going to take, this is a work in progress. We'll get done certain things. We'll learn a bunch of stuff along the way, but I think we have a rough idea of where we want to take some of the authentication conversations, which is important.
Yeah. So the last couple things I can do here is I'm getting a complaint from the compiler that this might be a null reference. And so I can say, like, well, fine, don't display anything if identity is null, even though if I get in here, identity should not be null. But I suppose you could be a user without. So anyways, the point is that got rid of that little thing. And the other thing I want to do is I want to change out this. People are going to have to pause the video and look at what I'm doing here. I wanted logout. I wanted a logout option to be right there.
Okay.
And so the way I ended up doing that is by bringing in a way to call account logout. But then I had all these same problems. It turns out that if you try to call account logout from just like an A element, just a link, it blows up because account logout expects an anti-forgery token.
Oh, okay.
Well, if I want to send an anti-forgery token, I need a form. This is a plain old HTML form.
Yep.
But then I also want the return URL stuff to work. So now I got to implement that real quick. And so what I really did is I did a little cut and pasting from what they did in the other component. And I said, okay, well, let's figure out the current URL when the location changes. Oh, but now I got to include navigation manager. So that means I got to come up here and inject the navigation manager, which is Blazor's way of letting you both navigate places, but also find out about your current environment. And after doing all that, so there's a lot there, unfortunately.
Right. Not that we're going to go down this path now, but couldn't all that be wrapped up in its own control?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
It could be its own component, right?
So
now we're in, and what I get is a button that lets me log out. And then when I log out, it says like, okay, fine, you're logged out. It's great.
Nice.
So theoretically, all that could be sitting up here. So no matter what page I'm on, I could quickly log out. And I think it would even just be like, okay, you're logged out. And then if the page happens to be one you can view, great. It'll be very interesting to see how Blazor responds if it's not an authorized page. Is it going to redirect me somewhere? I don't know. That's what we're learning. And it might be something that you at home are saying, hey, I really like the identity stuff, but how do I customize it for my own use case and how we like our flow to work for users and stuff? And that's kind of what got me headed down this path, is how do you customize it?
Yep.
So that's that. There's quite a bit there. We tried to componentize out login basically. I mean, and it worked, right? That all worked. So
no, I think we got everything that we talked about, we got to work.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say we planned all that or that we didn't plan more, but
yeah. And what's nice is I hope you at watching. You know, again, sometimes with I think our videos, it might be worthwhile watch again, maybe pause. I will try to get this bookmarked, especially places like where we created the new projects, we examined the current code, we created our component. I'll see if I can get it bookmarked quickly within the next day or so that coming back, you can say, hey, let me jump straight to this part. You know, this is really just the beginning. We've talked a lot about whether could this be made into a useful library that's reusable. I don't know yet. I'm always concerned about there's always, I think there will always be a last mile when it comes to identity of I've given you a lot of stuff. Now you got to make it work for your own user flow, how it looks, stuff like that. But it might, I don't know, maybe it's possible, but
yeah.
Hopefully,
are there some things that we can make it a little easier?
Hopefully you also got a look behind the covers of like how identity works. And don't be afraid at all when you're looking through this code to just go ahead, like I'm going to do right now, and just hit F12, and Visual Studio is going to take you to the source code. This happens to be an ASP.NET Core component, and you can at least go looking to be like, what are they doing? What's going on?
Yeah.
So, all right, a little late for stand up today. I don't know. So it turns out my team doesn't have stand up this morning. So haha, I don't know if I messed it up for you.
Yeah, and my customer meeting is not till 9:30, so I get that little bit of
okay. So we got a little lucky. I hope that you weren't late for stand up. We definitely had some people joining us. Thank you for saying hi in the chat drops. Anybody else who joined us, just thank you so much for joining us. If you watch us on YouTube, hit that like button if you like what we're doing. Comment if you have some more ideas or questions. And if you don't want to miss another show, hit subscribe. I know I'm also on my personal LinkedIn. It would be great someday to get our organizational LinkedIn to the number of followers. We'll stream there. But you know what? For now, just everybody have a great Thursday. And anything else, Rich? Are we good?
I think we're good.
All right.
Probably. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say that's it. Yeah.
Yep. All good here.
Yeah. All right. We will see you all next time on the Dev Talk Show.